Hello, I'm Shahan Ramkisoon. Thanks for joining us here in New York City. You're watching Arise News Now, your fast forward to stories that affect you, making headlines around the world in this hour. The Israeli Prime Minister tells the White House its planned nuclear deal with Iran is a huge mistake. But President Barack Obama says Benjamin Netanyahu made an even bigger mistake coming to the U.S. Trigger happy or defending their lives? LA police under fire for shooting a homeless man to death. And Microsoft on the wall. Take an easy guess who's the richest man of them all. We'll give you the lowdown on the Forbes billionaires list. Those stories and much more straight ahead. You should not be here. That's the message President Barack Obama has for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His comments come after Netanyahu criticized the U.S. for trying to reach a nuclear deal with Iran in Washington today. Obama says Israel's leader should not be addressing U.S. Congress tomorrow.
Now, as a matter of policy, we think it's a mistake for the Prime Minister of any country to come to speak before Congress a few weeks before they're about to have an election. It makes it look like we are taking sides.
But Netanyahu says he must address U.S. Congress because any deal with Iran threatens his country's survival. Now, to put this in context, Republican congressional leaders invited Netanyahu without giving advance notice to the White House. Netanyahu says the purpose of his speech is to address Israel's concerns.
My speech is not intended to show any disrespect to President Obama or the esteemed office that he holds. I have great respect for both. And as Prime Minister of Israel, I have a moral obligation to speak up in the face of these dangers while there's still time to avert them.
All right, let's cross live now to Arise News Washington correspondent Leila McDowell. Leila, both the president and Netanyahu seem dismissive of any rifts between the two. A little bit rosy, not so. What really is happening here?
Well, you know, both of them are sticking to their guns on the negotiations and insisting that the differences are not personal, but all about policy. And of course, they worked today to dampen down the tempest by Netanyahu's visit, which of course was done at the invitation of the House Speaker John Boehner over the president's objections, which were given privately. Now, also, you have to remember that Secretary of State Kerry today issued an urgent warning indirectly about the prime minister revealing confidential details of those negotiations. And Netanyahu said on the plane coming over to the United States that indeed he would use that in order to strengthen his arguments. So now the U.S. has stopped sharing those details. But you're absolutely right. Today was all about being rosy. The ambassador to the UN, the National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, all talked about how strong the alliance was with Israel, how strong the friendship was. Rice said, "We've got Israel's back no matter what." Shahan?
Yeah, Benjamin Netanyahu's address also threatens to intensify the division in Congress. Lots of initial criticism from Democrats and the White House. Has that tone changed at all?
Well, you know, you still have about 30 Democratic lawmakers who are expected to boycott the address tomorrow. And the rift is still there because this is very political. Of course, Republicans are hoping that this will help them garner votes among the influential pro-Israeli voters in 2016. And Democrats, you know, Jewish pro-Israeli Democrats had appealed to Prime Minister Netanyahu not to come or to address another venue than Congress. That fell on deaf ears. So there's still a lot of bad blood and bitter feelings and resentment around this.
Yeah, now we do know that the Republicans actually went behind the White House back, so to speak, and invited Netanyahu to speak at Congress. What are Democrats saying about that move?
Well, you know, they're saying that this was very disrespectful to the White House, but right now the message of the day is tone it down, tone it down. And to really focus on making arguments around the policy that, in fact, you know, negotiating with Iran and getting this open access to Iran's nuclear program is the best way to keep Israel safe. Shahan?
All right, thanks very much. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Leila McDowell. Now, in other news, the Los Angeles Police Department is promising a full investigation into the fatal shooting of a homeless man during a confrontation with officers. Officials say they encountered the man while responding to a robbery call. Local media quote police as saying the man was resisting arrest and trying to grab one of the officers' weapons. Video of the incident posted online shows an altercation. Once on the ground, the struggle continues and then several shots are fired.
During that altercation, at least one less than lethal device, a taser, was deployed. However, at this time, we still do not know if that taser did strike the suspect. After that, the struggle continued and an officer-involved shooting occurred.
An attorney for Tamir Rice blasted the city of Cleveland and police today for suggesting the boy was responsible for his own death. Officials were responding to a lawsuit filed by the family of the 12-year-old boy who was shot last November while playing with a pellet gun. Authorities have since apologized and promised to file new court documents. Unconstitutional. That's what a federal judge says Nebraska's ban on same-sex marriage is. But state officials quickly moved to appeal the ruling. 7 same-sex couples challenged the ban. The plaintiffs include a woman who has stage 4 cancer. She wants Nebraska to recognize her marriage to another woman, in part to provide financial protection for her children. Nina Pham is filing a lawsuit against the Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital and its parent company. She was the first person to contract the deadly Ebola virus in the U.S. while caring for Thomas Eric Duncan. He was infected in Liberia and flew to Dallas, where he was diagnosed and later died. Pham received special care and recovered. Hospital representatives wished her well and say they'd like to have constructive dialogue so the matter can be resolved. Now, Senator Barbara Mikulski, the Maryland lawmaker who became the longest-serving woman in the history of Congress, says she will not be seeking re-election next year. The 78-year-old says she had one question as she waits seeking a 6th term. Do I spend my time raising money, or do I spend my time raising hell? Her decision clears the way for a fight to replace her in the state's first open Senate seat in years. You're watching Arise News now.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They're bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow, strive for, and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
Welcome back. Now, Iraqi forces are intensifying efforts against ISIS in Tikrit. Armed forces backed by Shiite militia pounded IS strongholds north of Baghdad today. The military aimed to regain control of Tikrit and the surrounding Sunni Muslim province of Salahuddin. It's the biggest military operation in the province since last June. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi launched the operation on Sunday. Tikrit is best known to Westerners as the birthplace of former Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. The military's progress here will affect plans to recapture the city of Mosul further north. Now, we're learning more about the masked executioner known as Jihadi John. Just days after his unmasking, people who know Mohammed Emwazi are sharing stories about him. Arise correspondent Akhtar Khan tells us more.
Jihadi John has been identified as British national Mohammed Emwazi, but of Kuwaiti descent. Having been formally identified by his family, more details are now emerging of who Jihadi John is. Mohammed was alleged to have mixed with violent street gangs in London, with alleged links to Islamic extremist groups in Syria and Somalia. According to British media, Emwazi dressed like a gangster rapper and experimented with alcohol and cannabis in his late teens. At university, he was radicalised by hate preachers. After graduating, he left for Somalia to join Al-Shabaab in 2009. Failing to join the jihadi group, he came back to London, arrested en route. British Secret Service couldn't try to convince him to abandon his fanaticism. And in 2013, he left Britain for Syria to join ISIS.
I know I want to condemn. I want to condemn you guys for being the tongue of the biggest terrorists in the world, with the Americans and their own allies, the British. You're the ones who have the blood of hundreds of thousands of people on your hands, and yet you can't see it. You are deaf, you are dumb, you are blind, and you point the finger at the Muslims. Now the Muslims are rising up. You're saying, who radicalized them?
The full identity of Jihadi John was confirmed earlier last week by his family, a fact which was known to them as early as September 2014. Mohammed's father, Jassim, and his family are now in Kuwait, where they have been questioned by local authorities. Jihadi John's mother was quoted as saying, "This is my son," as she saw her eldest boy carry out his first beheading. Gayani Emwazi said she recognised her son immediately and became frenetic at the realisation. Jihadi John's father also told Kuwaiti police, quote, "We were all watching the video. We were scared to watch the video. Then we carried on watching it and we saw it was Mohammed. We were completely distraught. My son is religious and he hates the West. He feels that they have abused him."
We are an Islamic army.
Well, 2 people were killed when a bomb exploded near a court building in central Cairo. This is the second attack in a week. The repeated attacks have created doubts over the security forces' ability to end the violence. The ongoing battle has hampered Egypt's previously thriving tourism industry. Since taking office, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has tried to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood, which he holds responsible for the attacks. The group has denied this. Vladimir Putin has denounced the killing of his longtime opponent, Boris Nemtsov. He was shot while crossing a bridge on Friday. On Sunday, thousands of Russians marched through central Moscow carrying banners saying, "I am not afraid," and chanted, "Russia without Putin." In South Africa, a wildfire across Cape Town has engulfed the iconic Table Mountain in flames. There have been no deaths or injuries reported, but 5 homes and thousands of acres of rare plants have been destroyed. Firefighters are battling hot summer temperatures and strong winds, but they're aided by helicopters scooping water from the Atlantic Ocean, which are dumping it on hard-to-reach areas. In Nepal, after years of uncertainty and failed efforts, the government is again promising to push ahead with a new constitution without reaching national consensus. But many locals are upset over the move, leading to mass protests and clashes with police. Mana Rabai reports.
Clashes with riot police in Kathmandu after a protest that drew some 30,000 people to Nepal's capital. The demonstration was led by the Maoist opposition to demand that political parties reach a consensus on a new constitution. Police used tear gas and batons to stop the crowds from advancing to the parliament building, leaving more than a dozen people injured. Maoist Party Vice Chairman Narayan Kazi Shreda says the police response was way out of proportion.
The way they attacked with batons, tear gas, shelling at random, in whatever manner. These are acts that can be condemned. This government has exhibited its fascist attitude by not respecting democratic norms.
Nepal is struggling to cobble together its first constitution as a republic, nearly a decade after a civil war with Maoist rebels left more than 17,000 people dead. But the country's alliance of political parties has repeatedly missed deadlines to write the draft, and the former rebels have walked away from negotiations. They're angry that the government wants to push ahead with the new constitution via a vote in parliament where it has strength, without a national consensus first.
Now, sometimes a man needs his space, right? And sometimes a man can carelessly launch an international terrorism scare in his quest for space. Police announced today that a mysterious tunnel built in North Toronto ahead of the Pan-African Games is not part of a terrorist threat. Police were mystified by its origins, but after intense investigation, they found out two men built the tunnel only for personal reasons. It seems the Canadians were only trying to build a man cave to hang out. And if you want to save the embarrassment, and that's police are actually saving them the embarrassment, they did not release their names because it would definitely be a tough one to dig themselves out of. Had to throw in that pun. You're watching Arise News Now.
Last week on Arise Exchange, the first full week of trading began with stocks, oil, and the euro all sliding hard.
When you think about oil, you want to think about how's that affecting your portfolio.
Republican House Speaker John Boehner may have a new Tea Party revolt on his hands. Jeff Flake threw a Playboy Mansion-like party for his daughter. Police discovered as many as 200 underage kids drunk. He is not only our favorite person of the day, but also the greatest dad of the year. Watch this week for more Arise Exchange.
Welcome back. Let's dig a little deeper into our top story now. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addresses Congress tomorrow. The divide couldn't be clearer. President Barack Obama believes he has the support of the American people and of liberal Jewish organizations to push ahead with a nuclear deal with Iran. But Netanyahu thinks he has the support of Congress, mainly the Republicans who invited him, and, of course, the Israeli lobbyists here in the U.S. Now, to tell us more about Iran's talks in this and why it sparked so much interest and why there's been so much opposition is Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, Senior Fellow at New York University Center for Global Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out. Firstly, how far are we in terms of getting this plan signed and into effect?
Well, we're still rather far because there's still significant differences between the United States and Iran in connection with the duration of the agreement, in terms of how fast the sanctions should be removed, in terms of the grade of uranium that it can or cannot be enriched, and in terms of the other facilities. So there's still many difficulties, but there have been some progress, and they believe they can actually achieve some kind of a resolution perhaps by the end of the month.
Yeah. Now, why is Benjamin Netanyahu so rushed to try and counter this plan from actually happening?
Because one of the principles of the agreement is the enrichment. Iran insisted on enriching uranium on its own soil. The United States has agreed to that requirement, that demand. And this is exactly what Netanyahu feels, that as long as Iran enriches uranium, Iran will be able to develop the kind of enriched uranium enough to have a nuclear weapon. And that is the principal objection of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah. So why are Western powers trying to make this deal? Why is it so important to them?
Because the alternative, if you don't have a deal, then what? then Iran will continue to pursue a nuclear weapon program. And the United States will be faced with, with two options: to leave Iran to its own devices and then engage in containing, which is extremely difficult, or to try a deal, however imperfect, but we will have the opportunity to continue very close monitoring of Iran nuclear program and make sure that Iran slowed progress, and hopefully over time, perhaps 10, 12 years, perhaps we can, the geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East will change in a dramatic way, obviously, and that could lead to new opportunities and new options. And that is, again, maybe some wishful thinking in it, but there's no doubt an effort to have some kind of a resolution now or an agreement is better than having no agreement whatsoever.
All right, very quickly, last question. Tell me, why is Netanyahu here? Is it anything to do with his upcoming elections, getting support internationally?
There's no question. There's no question this is going to play well at home. And for him, this is a coup to come to the United States, speak in front of the joint session of Congress. And Israel is going to look, well, he is the leader, he's the protector, the ultimate protector of the state of Israel. And that, without any question, will impress many voters in Israel.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was Dr. Alon Ben-Meir joining us from the New York University Global Affairs Department. You're watching Arise News now.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
I don't think the television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting the diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at business news. Believe it or not, Spain's economies minister says Eurozone nations are negotiating a third bailout for Greece. If that happens, it'll see the financially strapped country getting as much as $56 billion. Spanish officials say Greece will not leave the Eurozone because that wouldn't be good for the other 18 countries that use the common euro currency. Now to Nigeria, where fuel shortages are paralyzing businesses and transportation, this ahead of the country's general elections. Many motorists say their livelihood is suffering a setback. The long lines of cars at gas stations are causing traffic jams across main roads.
Now that I want to go back home now because I'm not going to do anything today again. Time is gone. When you check time now, it's 3 o'clock. Where am I going to start with? I'm going home because I guess tomorrow. When I work tomorrow, and then I will sleep for police station, I guess next tomorrow, except if we come back. If we don't come back, I don't know what to do. That is the problem.
Now, the West African country largely depends on fuel imports, despite being one of the world's top crude oil exporters. Here's a way to travel, and you don't have to pack your bags. Google Street View can now take you on a trip through the Amazon rainforest. The tour is filmed on a zip line, allowing virtual travelers to take in the scenic sights. You can even see insects, plants, and how people live in the villages along the Amazon River. It's that time of the year again when we hear about who's made the Forbes list of billionaires. And it's not me, unfortunately. The world's wealthiest defied the global economic turmoil. And yes, the list expanded. If you're wondering who's #1 on the list, no surprise, Bill Gates is the richest person on the planet. His fortune grew $3.2 billion, damn, that's so much, I can't even say it, since last year, to $79.2 billion. And the rookie on the list, former professional basketball player Michael Jordan. You can catch more business news on Arise Exchange every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that's 10 p.m. GMT. In entertainment news, it's official. Kelly Osbourne is saying goodbye to Fashion Police after criticizing her co-host's controversial joke about actress Zendaya's dreadlocks. Kelly decided to walk away from the E! Entertainment series for good. This is the latest in a series of problems for the once thriving show. Fashion Police has been plagued by a drop in ratings ever since the death of former star Joan Rivers. Now it's time for our weekend box office winners. All in all, movies took a bit of a dive with ticket sales down 14% compared to 2014. The romantic thriller movie starring Will Smith, Focus, came in at number 1. Big Willie conquered the box office, bringing in $19.1 million. Kingsman, The Secret Service, held on to its second place for the third weekend in a row with $11.8 million. And the SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, got third place. The animated adventure brought in $11.2 million. Now, some sad news. The first black Latino major league to play for a Chicago team has died. Nicknamed the Cuban Comet, Minnie Minoso was a White Sox legend and a huge figure in the racial integration of Major League Baseball in the 1950s. He went on to become a 7-time All-Star and played 17 seasons in the majors. Minnie Minoso died of natural causes. He was 90 years old.
Here at Arise America, we want to bring you news from a different perspective, and not just news, but analysis as well. Tell me what it was like growing up gay in Uganda.
I have suffered sexual violence, including that has been planned by my family to heal me from lesbianism.
To have somebody lead your child away in handcuffs is just not something that should be done to a 12-year-old child.
You called this Victims Advocate Group, this phone number, which is sponsored by the Catholic Church, correct?
Right.
And what kind of response did you get?
They told me not to make prank calls and it wasn't appropriate and hung up the phone.
My God. Michael Dunn could go away for, many decades. Is that enough for you?
No, it's not. The person that killed Jordan Davis has to be found guilty by a court of law in the United States of America.
Apple unveiled new products today. Did it meet expectations?
Apple stock is up 20%.
The White House says it has proper measures to contain the spread of Ebola. This seems to be, in some ways, exploding. What are officials saying?
We remain focused on working with our partners on the ground to stop the epidemic.
Enhanced measures have been put in place in Africa and the United States.
This is hitting home in a very real way, and I think, we need to be concerned.
Hello and welcome to Arise America. I'm Debbie Turner-Bell.
And the home of Guinea's first Ebola case has been virus-free since January 31st. The recovery represents a huge success for aid group the MSF, but the organization remains on high alert.
The treatment tents are mostly empty, the staff no longer rushed off their feet. No new cases of Ebola have been identified in Guakadou in Guinea since the district was declared safe at the end of January.
It was the first centre taken over by MSF almost a year ago now. It's weird, it warms the heart of all the teams. We're all very happy to see how far we've come. It's very symbolic.
But Médecins Sans Frontières isn't letting down its guard. Elsewhere in Guinea, Ebola continues to claim lives. And during this much welcomed lull, the team has to play catch-up.
We were chasing behind the epidemic, trying to catch up. A treatment centre is not the way to stop Ebola. There are all these stages of intervention which can come beforehand, which should also be in place to end the epidemic.
MSF workers are now focusing on raising awareness among traditional practitioners.
Patients fled the hospital and came to us. As traditional healers, we didn't have the strength needed to fight against this disease. So we sent them to hospitals which could help them.
With greater resources, the fight against Ebola is becoming more efficient. But as well as dealing with patients, health workers have faced other problems. In February, several Red Cross and MSF facilities were ransacked. 14 people were recently sentenced to 1 year in prison for violently attacking an Ebola awareness team. Attitudes are slowly starting to shift, but the fight against the virus, as well as beliefs and opinions, is slow and painful.